What's up, everybody? This is Tech G back with another video to help you successfully pass the CompTIA A+ 1201 certification exam. So let's get into it. If you ever hit the power button on a PC and nothing happened, or maybe heard a weird beep followed by a blank screen, then you already dipped your toes into the world of hardware troubleshooting. And trust me, this rabbit hole can go deep. So in this video, I'm going to break down how to troubleshoot motherboards, RAM, CPUs, and power. Now, I know all this stuff can sound intimidating, but at the end of the video, you're going to feel way more confident dealing with these dreaded post beeps, blank screens, and mysterious shutdowns. So with that being said, let's go. All right, so before we get into any of that, we got to talk about the 6-step troubleshooting methodology. Now, when it comes to troubleshooting any issues with your computers, this is the methodology that CompTIA recommends that you follow. However, when you're dealing with issues in real life, this thing can vary. But as far as this is concerned, first thing you want to do is identify the problem. So you want to question the user and identify any user changes to the computer. If applicable, you want to perform backups before making further changes. You want to inquire about environmental or infrastructural changes that might have occurred. You want to review system application logs for clues to possible system errors. After that, you want to establish a theory of probable cause and question the obvious. So if necessary, conduct internal or external research based on symptoms, use your organization's knowledge base, or go to Google and YouTube and find the answer. And then after that, you want to test the theory to determine the cause. So when the theory is confirmed, determine the next steps to resolve the issue. If the theory is not confirmed, you want to reestablish a new theory or escalate the issue to somebody who can solve it for you. Then after that, you want to establish a plan of action to resolve the problem, implement the solution. So basically, you want to refer to the vendor's instructions for guidance. And then after you do all of that, verify full system functionality, and if applicable, implement preventative measures, and then document your findings. Now, once again, this is the theoretical troubleshooting methodology that CompTIA says that you should know. But when you're in the real world dealing with real issues, you may or may not go by this because, quite honestly, working in tech, you're going to come across the same issues over and over again. So it's not like you're going to have to keep running back to this methodology to figure out what's wrong. You're just going to automatically know what the issue is after you've been doing this for a while. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, let's get back to our regular lesson. All right, so once again, we're talking about troubleshooting motherboards, RAM, CPUs, and power. So we need to understand the core components that we're dealing with here. So before we go symptom hunting, let's quickly review the 4 hardware stars of the show. First, we have the motherboard, and this is the central hub where all components connect. And if this thing fails, then your whole system is in trouble. Then you have RAM, and this helps your system multitask. So if you got some bad RAM, you're going to have some slow or crashing applications. You got your CPU or your processor, and this is the brain of the computer. And if this thing is overheating or misbehaving, your system is going to suffer. Then there's your power supply. This powers everything because without it, nothing is going to work. Now that we got that foundation out of the way, let's look at the real world symptoms that you might run into and how to fix them like a pro. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about post beeps. So remember those beeps your PC makes when it starts up? Well, that's post, and that stands for power on self-test. Basically, this is your computer trying to talk to you. So if you have no beeps, then that can mean that there's no power, you have a dead motherboard, or a failed CPU. If you got one beep, that usually means everything is all good, depending upon your BIOS manufacturer. And if you get repeating beeps, this may indicate RAM issues, video card failures, or CPU faults. How you go about fixing this stuff? You want to look up the beep codes that are specific to the BIOS brand that you have. But you want to reseat the RAM and the GPU. You want to clear the CMOS, and basically you can just pull that little battery out and put it back in. You want to test your components one at a time. And as a tip, you always want to test on a non-conductive surface. So stay away from cardboard boxes on carpet. Another issue that you might run across is the proprietary crash screen, which is what you're looking at on your screen right here. So if you see a blue screen on Windows, also known as the blue screen of death, or a spinning pinwheel on a Mac OS, then something serious is up. And the possible causes are you can have faulty RAM, you can have an overheating CPU, you can have driver or hardware conflicts, or you can have a motherboard or chipset failure. How you go about fixing this stuff is you want to run memory diagnostics like the Windows memory diagnostic software. You want to monitor your CPU temperatures using free tools like HW Monitor. You want to check the event viewer for error codes, and you want to update your BIOS and UEFI and drivers. And don't just reset everything and hope for the best. You want to investigate the error code list because this could be a huge deal. All right, next we have a blank screen, or you have no display. So you press the power button and the monitor just stays black. There's no logo, there's no boot, it's just complete darkness. And what can cause this? You have no video output, meaning you have a bad GPU or onboard graphics card. your RAM is not seated properly, your CPU or motherboard is having some type of failure, or there's simply no power. And the fixes are, you can check if the monitor is working on another machine. You can reseat the GPU and the RAM. You can remove all but one stick of RAM and try each slot. You can check for bent CPU socket pins, or you can listen for post beeps or test with a speaker. But then once you do all of that, you want to try a minimum boot with your motherboard and CPU on one stick of RAM and the onboard video to see if this computer comes back to life. Another issue is no power. So you hit the power button, nothing happens, no fans, no LEDs, nothing. And the root cause could be a faulty power supply, a loose power cable, a dead motherboard, a damaged power button, or incorrect voltage switch. How you fix this? You want to use a PSU tester or swap in a known good power supply unit. You want to check the power cable in the wall outlet. You want to ensure the front panel connectors are plugged in right. And you want to flip the voltage switch only if it's safe and appropriate to do so. And also, never, ever, ever open up a PSU or a power supply unit unless you enjoy getting electrocuted. Just simply replace those things. Do not repair them. So once again, if you have a faulty PSU, do not open it up, because you might be going to meet your maker if you do that. Just simply get a new one or replace it. Do not open it up. Another issue you might experience is sluggish performance, meaning everything works, but it's going extremely slow. And the reasons for this could be you're dealing with failing RAM, you're dealing with an overheated CPU, you got a bunch of dust that's clogging the cooling systems, you got background processes of malware that are just eating up all your resources, or you got outdated firmware. Now, how you fix this, you can run the task manager to find memory-hungry processes and shut them down. You can clean dust from the fans and heat sinks. You can apply fresh thermal paste to the CPU. You can run malware scans, or you can upgrade to faster RAM or an SSD. So when it comes to this, basically a little cleaning and maintenance, this can go a long way to speeding up your computer. Another issue is that of overheating. So if your PC feels like a toaster or it keeps shutting down when you're gaming or working hard, then you got some problems. And some of those problems could be a bad CPU fan or a heat sink issue. Your thermal paste has dried out. You have poor airflow, meaning you got a bunch of dust all in your case and it's blocking the vents, or you've overclocked without adequately cooling your system. How you fix this? You just want to reapply some thermal paste. You want to clean your fans and ensure airflow direction is correct. You want to add more case fans or replace with higher RPM ones. And you want to check your BIOS and CPU temperatures and fan speeds. Now, you don't need a liquid cooling system for most builds, but you do need clear airflow regardless of what type of build you have. Another issue is burning smells, and this is bad. So if your PC smells like burnt toast, then you want to shut this thing off immediately. And the reasons for this is you could be dealing with a failing PSU. You can be dealing with fried capacitors on the motherboard. You could be dealing with overheated CPUs or VRM. And it could be a bunch of dust that is short-circuiting the components. How you fix this? Unplug everything immediately, open the case and visually inspect all the components, look for scorch marks or swollen capacitors, and replace the PSU or the motherboard. And also remember that electrical fires are a real risk. Do not ignore any burning smells. Another issue is random shutdowns. So your PC just turns off for whatever reason. Well, what can cause that? That could be an overheated CPU or PSU, power surges, RAM errors, BIOS settings, or a failing power supply. How you fix this? You want to monitor the temperatures and how much power this thing is drawing. You want to use a surge protector or an UPS. You want to run RAM diagnostics, and you want to update your BIOS or check power management settings. Now, if the system reboots or turns off in a loop, then it's usually thermal or PSU related. And then there's application crashes. So apps, they can crash or freeze randomly, even lightweight ones like browsers or Notepad. And the reason why is because of a faulty RAM or CPU, software conflicts, malware, and overclocked CPU or incompatible BIOS version. And how you fix this? You want to run the SFC scan now command or the DISM DISM on Windows. You want to test the RAM by using memtest86. You want to disable the overclocking. And you want to check the reliability monitor in Windows. Now, if only one application is crashing, then this might just be the software. However, if you have a bunch of applications crashing, then this could be your hardware. Another issue is unusual noises. So if you hear some buzzing, clicking, or grinding, well, that is not the soundtrack of a healthy PC. And what can possibly cause all of that is a PSU fan or motherboard. You got your CPU fan bearings that are going bad, or something is hitting the fan blades like a loose cable, or you have shorting components. How you go about fixing all this, you want to clean and secure all of your cables, replace noisy fans, or consider a higher quality PSU with better components. Also, you can use a cardboard tube like a paper towel roll to isolate sound like a mini stethoscope. And then there's the issue of a capacitor that is swelling. And this is a visual one. So you're going to open up the computer and you're going to see a bulging, leaking, or corroded capacitor on your motherboard. And that's what you see in this picture right here. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that the capacitor is failing and the motherboard is likely unstable. And this can cause random shutdowns, boot issues, or damage to other components. So what do? Well, you got to replace your motherboard. Now, if you are skilled with a soldering iron, then you might be able to replace this thing yourself. But if not, just simply chalk it up and go get you a new motherboard. Also, as a side note, bad caps, these were a huge issue in early 2000s boards. Now, the modern motherboards that are out now, they are way more reliable, but they are still not immune to this issue. All right, so another issue that you might encounter is the incorrect system date and time. So if every time you turn on your computer and your computer thinks it's 2001, then you got a problem. So why does this happen? Well, your CMOS battery could be dead, or your BIOS can't retain settings when it's powered off. So how do you fix this? Well, you want to replace the CMOS battery. And if you don't know what the CMOS battery is, just open up your motherboard and you're going to see a circular little silver battery that is sitting on your motherboard. Replace that thing. All right, that is your CMOS battery. Then you want to enter your BIOS and reset the date and time and then save and exit. So if you see any weird BIOS errors or boot loops, then once again, replace the battery, because that is a cheap and easy way to possibly correct that issue. All right, so we've covered all common symptoms, but how do you actually approach a hardware problem like a professional? Well, here's your battle plan. First, you want to start simple. You want to check to see if the thing is plugged in. Is the switch flipped on the PSU? And are all of the fans spinning? Then you want to go ahead and strip this thing down. So you want to unplug unnecessary components. You want to try post with only the motherboard, CPU, and one stick of RAM. Do you want to swap known good parts? So replace with a working PSU, RAM, or CPU if available, and test questionable parts in another known good system. You also want to document everything. So take pictures of cable connections and keep notes of what you tried, especially for certification exams. And also you want to stay grounded. So use an anti-static wrist strap and work on non-conductive surfaces. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap all this up. So troubleshooting, this is where theory meets real world experience. Now you can memorize all the A+ facts in the world, but if you don't know what a burning capacitor smells like or how to recognize a post beep error, then you're going to have some issues. And these types of problems are where IT pros earn their stripes. So understanding how to troubleshoot motherboards, RAM, CPU, and power, this isn't just about passing an exam. It's about becoming the go-to tech person that everyone can rely upon. So the next time a friend says, hey, my computer won't turn on, then hopefully you'll know exactly what to do to solve that issue. And with that being said, let's do some check on learning. So our first question is, you press the power button on a desktop PC, but nothing happens. There's no fans, no lights, no beeps. What is the most likely cause? Is this due to faulty RAM, a failed power supply unit, a corrupted BIOS, or a missing operating system? And the correct answer is this is due to a failed power supply unit. So if the system shows absolutely no signs of life, meaning there's no fans, no LEDs, no post beeps, the PSU is often the root cause. In a failed PSU, this will prevent the system from getting any power at all. Faulty RAM or BIOS, this wouldn't cause a total lack of power, and a missing operating system would only become apparent after post. Next question. A technician notices a burning smell coming from the PC. Upon entering the case, they find bulging capacitors on the motherboard. What should they do next? Should they run a full antivirus scan, reseat the RAM modules, replace the motherboard, or reset the BIOS settings? And the correct answer is they're going to replace the motherboard. So bulging or leaking capacitors just indicate that the motherboard has suffered hardware damage and is no longer reliable. The only proper solution is to replace the motherboard. RAM or BIOS resets will not fix physical component failure, and antivirus scanning is irrelevant in this hardware context. And our final question is, a user reports frequent application crashes and system instability. The crash happens across multiple programs. What component is most likely causing the issue? Is this the video card, faulty RAM, power supply, or the hard drive? And the correct answer is faulty RAM. So, unstable or faulty RAM is a common cause of system wide instability and application crashes. While other components can also cause issues, RAM affects how data is temporarily stored and accessed. So, if applications crash randomly, especially unrelated ones, then RAM is often the culprit.